One of the greatest indie games of all time started as a bug-eating simulator that players hated. Before Hollow Nest took shape, a scrappy little prototype stumbled into something bigger. Back in August of 2013, the Team Cherry guys made this thing called Hungry Night for London Dare 27. You had to kill bugs every 10 seconds or you would starve to death. It got terrible reviews when it hit Newgrounds in 2014, but they loved their little bug so much that they refused to let it die. Then they missed another jam with the theme Beneath the Surface, but that failure turned into gold. The Underground Bug Kingdom concept came straight out of that missed deadline, and one of the best indie games ever was born from a trash idea and a contest they didn't even enter. And when that idea grew, survival came down to scraps and support. Their Kickstarter barely cleared 58,000 AUD, which is pocket change in game dev terms. The dev team lived off leftovers, small bills from William's dad, and a cheap Adelaide office where rent didn't crush them. Partners with steady jobs covered the rest, quietly keeping food on the table while the guys poured everything into Hollow Knight. It wasn't just passion that built Hollow Nest, but it was a whole support system of family, partners, and the luck of living in the right city. Without that safety net, the game probably would have never existed. But aside from this insane support system, what else helped the team finish this entire project? Well, before Hollow Knight, Ari Gibson ran an animation studio, and the profits from that business became the seed money for the game. That early cushion gave Team Cherry the chance to take risks without starving right away. Skills from animation carried over to the game's art style, while the financial stability brought them valuable time. It shows how one creative career can fund another. Hollow Knight wasn't just born from scratch, it was built on years of hard work in a different industry. This blend of savings and skill turned into the foundation for Hollow Nest. Past success made new dreams possible. Those bigger swings still came from a tiny crew. The core team of Hollow Knight wasn't quite the three-person miracle everyone imagines, but it was close. Ari Gibson drew everything. William Pellin designed the gameplay, and David Kazi coded it until he left in 2017. But Jack Vine also joined as a coder, and Christopher Larkin did the music as a contractor. That's still a tiny team. This small group made a game that felt like it had hundreds of developers. They worked in one small office in Adelaide, living on passion and cheap food. A handful of people created something that rivals games made by massive studios. Every idea, every boss, every secret. There were just a few dudes in a room. That's more impressive than any hidden content. Even with a tiny crew, the movement was calculated down to the frame. While the voices were complete improvisation, the movement system was straight up theft. Team Cherry openly admits that they copied Mega Man X's movement. No acceleration, instant direction changes, that perfect dash that cancels everything. It's all Mega Man.
The other big influence that ended up being in there is Mega Man X.
Yep. And Mega Man Zero as well.
And Mega Man Zero. So that probably wasn't something we cited at the start. We probably did end up referencing that quite a bit in making the game.
William Pellin said they wanted digital movement like old NES games, not realistic physics. Every hit should feel avoidable until the last possible second. That's why speedrunners can do those insane frame-perfect dodges, because the movement is literally designed like a 90s platformer. They even mentioned Mega Man X8 as inspiration, which is weird because nobody really talks about X8. Your Bug Knight is basically Mega Man in a Halloween costume. And if the controls nodded to Mega Man, where did the world's roots really come from? And speaking of unexpected inspirations that nobody talks about, here's the real shocker. Everyone compares Hollow Knight to Dark Souls, but Team Cherry says their real inspiration was Foxanadu, some ancient NES game from 1987 that nobody's ever heard of. It's about exploring a world tree infected by evil dwarves. Team Cherry flipped it, and instead of going up a tree, you're going down into the earth. The whole mysterious warrior arrives at a cursed kingdom thing is straight from Foxanadu. The only reason people mention Dark Souls is because you drop your money when you die. The developers were probably so sick of Dark Souls comparisons when their actual inspiration was way more obscure and way older. And along with the throwback roots, the charm system was lifted and tuned. But while Steel Soul was an accident, the charm system was deliberate plagiarism from the start. The charm system that everyone loves is just Paper Mario's badge system with bugs. Limited slots, mix and match powers, some take more space, but it's the exact same system. Team Cherry just added the overcharmed mechanic where you take double damage damage for equipping too much. Originally, charms were meant to be permanent upgrades, but that was boring, so they borrowed Nintendo's homework and made it about insects. One of Hollow Knight's best features is straight up stolen from a game about a paper plumber. Sometimes the best ideas are the ones you can, borrow. Not every nod was subtle though, since some were love letters to classics. Grimm's attacks are straight up stolen from Castlevania's Dracula. Fire bats, flame pillars, the cape opening to shoot projectiles, that's all Dracula. Team Cherry didn't even try to hide it. The entire Grimm Troop DLC has vampire DNA, from the gothic horror to the ritual themes. Grimm is Dracula as a bug doing a theater performance. Team Cherry wore their influences proudly. Sometimes the best design is taking something iconic and putting your own spin on it. Bug Dracula is somehow scarier than regular Dracula because, I mean, hey, let's be honest, bugs are already kinda creepy. That same love for classics showed up in the visuals as well. Hollow Knight's user interface isn't just random design choices. Team Cherry actually studied Gothic cathedral architecture to create the menus and icons that we see in-game. The small arrow shapes, borders, and decorative elements all echo medieval church design. Players may not realize it, but every time they pause the game or open a menu, they're looking at centuries of architectural influence. The result is a style that feels both old and new at the same time. Blending historic art with modern gaming created a unique look that helped Hollow Knight stand out. It's a perfect mix of culture and creativity. And beyond design choices, real people nearby helped make it work. Team Cherry didn't handle everything alone. Another indie group, Shark Jump Studios, stepped in to help with the tricky job of console ports. Without their support, Hollow Knight might have never reached so many platforms. Instead of competing, the studios collaborated, proving that indie game companies thrive when they share knowledge and resources. Players gained a smoother experience across consoles because of this teamwork. It's an example of how small developers lift each other up instead of trying to outdo one another. The strength of Australia's indie scene comes from cooperation, and Hollow Knight is a perfect example of that spirit. What happens when external forces step in and hardware history reroutes everything? Hollow Knight actually began development for the Wii U, but when Nintendo killed the console, Team Cherry had no choice but to pivot to the Switch. It was a huge shift that meant extra work, but in hindsight, it probably saved the game. The Wii U never really took off, while the Switch became a global hit. By moving platforms, Hollow Knight found a much bigger audience and thrived. This shows how fragile indie development can be. Sometimes your success depends not just on what you make, but on whether the platform survives long enough for people to actually play it. Even with platform chaos, the art stayed stubbornly human. Hollow Knight's art style wasn't heavily cleaned up or polished digitally. R. Gibson's hand-drawn sketches were scanned right into the game, keeping the texture and imperfections. You can see pencil strokes and little quirks that make the art feel alive. Instead of chasing sterile perfection, the team embraced the human touch. And that's why the world feels so warm and organic, even in its darkest places. It has soul, because you can sense the hand that drew it. In a time when most games chase flawless graphics, Hollow Knight stands out by letting traditional art survive. It feels handcrafted because at its core, it really is. From that handmade line work came a world that feels deep in 2D. Hollow Knight might be a 2D game, but it often feels like it has real depth. That's because the world is built in 3 layers: the foreground, midground, and the background. Each moves at a slightly different speed, creating the illusion of 3D space. This trick, called parallax, makes caves feel deep and cities feel tall without needing expensive 3D graphics. It's a smart use of art and perspective that tricks your brain into feeling immersed. Even though the world is flat, it feels layered and full of life. Team Cherry proved that with clever design, you don't need big technology to create big worlds. And that sense of depth only works because readability wins every time. The most detailed layer in Hollow Knight is always where you play. The background is simpler and the foreground stays light so it doesn't block your view. This is done on purpose. During battles or platforming, you need to clearly see what matters: enemies, hazards, and the knight's position. If everything were overly detailed, it would be distracting. By designing with clarity in mind, Team Cherry made sure that the game always feels fair. The visuals are still beautiful, but never at the cost of gameplay. It's a great example of how smart design puts the player's experience before pure artistic flair. Taking that clarity further, your shadows quietly steer you around. The black silhouettes in the foreground are not just there for style. They're actually used to guide where you move without you even realizing it. Team Cherry placed these shapes in ways that naturally draw your attention or push you toward certain paths. You feel like you're exploring freely, but the level design is quietly steering you. Instead of arrows or flashing signs, shadows and shapes keep you on track. It's a clever way to guide players while still letting the world feel mysterious. You think you're making all the choices, but really the environment is working like a subtle tour guide. If shadows guide you, then what makes your brain follow so naturally? Well, humans are naturally drawn to light, and Hollow Knight uses that instinct. The night has a faint glow, and lanterns or bright areas are placed near important paths. Without thinking, you're pulled toward the light and often end up exactly where the designers want you to go. You don't feel forced because it feels natural. Darkness makes you cautious, while bright areas make you curious. That balance keeps exploration smooth without needing arrows or quest markers. It's level design that quietly uses psychology to lead you forward. You're following instinct, not instructions, which makes the adventure feel organic and immersive. Building on that instinct, color turns into a compass. White is the rarest and most important color in Hollow Knight. The night is white, and so are key characters and objects. Against the game's muted backgrounds, white always pops out. This makes you instantly notice what matters most. Team Cherry designed it this way so players could learn the rule without being told. When you see white, you know it is worth your time. The color itself becomes a signal training you as you play. Instead of using flashy icons, the game relies on consistency. That choice makes the world feel natural while still giving you clear guidance at a glance. And if white leads you, black defines what to fear. Whenever you see pure black in Hollow Knight, it almost always means void. Team Cherry kept this rule consistent throughout the game. Over time, you start linking the color to the lore and the creatures tied to it. This consistency gives the game a clear visual language. Without needing dialogue, you already understand the meaning just by looking. Black isn't just the color in the background, but it carries weight and story. By reserving it for the void, Team Cherry made sure the symbolism stays strong. It shows how even simple color choices can hold deep narrative importance in game design. Against that black void, orange jumps out as pure danger. The orange glow of the infection stands out instantly in a world filled with blues and grays. The choice wasn't random. Team Cherry picked orange because it naturally feels loud, unnatural, and dangerous. The contrast makes infected areas look sick even before enemies appear. It taps into color psychology where certain hues make us uncomfortable. The moment you see orange, you know the area is corrupted. It also helps with gameplay because you can spot danger zones quickly. The color itself does the warning. No text needed. It's simple, effective, and unforgettable design that makes the infection impossible to ignore. And that screaming orange came from a hilariously gross place. Believe it or not, Team Cherry once called the infection rotten pizza cheese during development. The melted, stringy look of the infection really does resemble spoiled cheese. It might sound funny, but it works because it gives the corruption a gross, sticky vibe players can instantly relate to. Everyone knows what bad food looks like, so the design feels familiar while still being alien. That small joke turned into an effective art choice that shaped entire areas of the game. It's a reminder that even silly inspirations can lead to strong visual storytelling when used creatively. Rotten pizza never looked so scary. Before they landed on orange, they'd try to use usual disease colors and toss them. Well, most games use green or purple when they want to show poison or corruption. Team Cherry tried those, but they felt too generic. They wanted something that would stand out and feel unique to Hollow Knight. That's why they went with orange. Against the game's darker tones, it feels more intense and memorable. Players now instantly recognize the infection, and it doesn't blend in with common fantasy tropes. Choosing originality over cliches made the world more distinct. It also gave Hollow Knight a color signature that still sticks with players long after they finish. Sometimes bold choices make lasting impressions. Once the colors set the mood, the bodies start telling you what happened. Every skeleton or husk you see scattered across Hollow Nest is carefully placed. They're not random decorations to fill space, but clues that hint at what happened in that area. A fallen guard near a broken gate suggests a last stand. A curled body in a corner shows someone tried to hide and failed. These details let you piece together stories without needing dialogue. It makes the world feel alive and tragic at the same time. Instead of the game spelling things out, you're invited to read the history yourself just by looking around. It's storytelling that rewards curiosity and attention. If corpses tell the story, the moss stamps the date. The moss growing across Hollow Nest isn't just there for atmosphere. It actually works like a timeline. Fresh green moss means a place was abandoned more recently, while thick layers show centuries of decay. Team Cherry used plant growth as a way to mark how long something's been left behind. By paying attention, you can figure out how long an area or skeleton has been sitting there. It makes exploring feel like you're uncovering history one patch of moss at a time. Nature itself tells you the age of the ruins, turning every mossy wall into a clock for Hollownest's downfall. Outside of the game, the manual captured that same sense of history in sketches. The physical manual did more than explain lore. It also showed concept art that revealed how characters changed over time. Some designs looked very different before reaching their final form. Seeing that process gives players a peek behind the curtain at how much iteration goes into game art. It's rare to get this kind of creative history preserved in print. Most games release and those drafts disappear forever, but here, fans got to see the evolution, mistakes, and refinements that shaped Hollow Knight. It turns a simple manual into a piece of creative history and inspiration for future artists. That habit of trimming almost cut the music we now adore. Another thing that almost got simplified out of existence was the soundtrack itself. In that beautiful soundtrack that always brings a tear to my eye, Christopher Larkin wasn't even supposed to be involved. He only joined after the Kickstarter succeeded and they had the extra money. Before that, Team Cherry was probably going to make the music themselves or use generic stock music. Larkin's dad was a classical conductor, and he studied at a fancy music school in Adelaide. This guy brought real musical education to a game about bug murder. Just imagine City of Tears without that piano theme. We almost lived in a world where Hollow Knight had elevator music instead of a masterpiece of a soundtrack. They brought in a composer, but were the voice lines really just the devs messing around? While they brought in a pro for the music, the voice acting stayed hilariously amateur. All those bug voices were just William and Ari making weird noises into a microphone. Every male character is basically them going "bapanada" in different ways. The female characters were voiced by their office friend Makoto Koji, who did Hornet, the Mantis Lords, and wait for it, Flukamar. Yeah, the same person who voices the cool warrior princess also voices the screaming flesh mother. The bug language isn't even a real language because it's just gibberish. Fans have spent years trying to decode it, even making translation guides. The developers probably laughed their heads off watching people analyze their random mouth noises. And if the voices were homemade, the so-called language was even faker. And while we're talking about things the community obsesses over that don't actually exist, let's discuss the fake language. Fans think Coral sounds Chinese, Izelda sounds Spanish, and Cloth sounds Arabic. It's all meaningless. Team Cherry didn't direct the voice actors, but they just made whatever noises felt right. The community has spent years trying to decode the bug language, making translation guides and dictionaries for gibberish. Someone probably has a PhD in made-up bug speak by now. The developers have gotta have a laugh watching people obsess and overanalyze their random mouth sounds like they're ancient texts. We're basically trying to translate someone going blah 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 into a microphone. And after all that make-believe, the bench sound is just plain human. That satisfying bench sound was just someone sighing into a microphone with effects. Team Cherry tried metal sounds, stone grinding, magical sound effects, but nothing worked. Then someone just exhaled tiredly and they realized that was perfect. Millions of players have heard Team Cherry's exhausted sighing thousands of times. The most iconic sound in the game, well, aside from Hornet's voice lines, is just someone being tired. It's fitting because after some of those platforming sections, both you and the knight need a sigh of relief. Sometimes the best sound design is just human expression. Once the code settled, the audio experiments got weird fast and set up the tiny cues that would matter later. You know all those disgusting infection sounds that make your skin crawl? Well, here's something that'll change how you hear the game forever. Those wet, horrible noises are just people breathing really close to a microphone with some effects thrown on top. Team Cherry didn't want to hire expensive voice actors, so they got creative in the weirdest way possible. They would literally sit in their tiny recording room and breathe in the most bizarre ways, then add reverb and distortion until it sounded absolutely terrifying. The Broken Vessel's bone-chilling screams was just heavy breathing pitched way up. Even the creepy background noise in the infected crossroads is layered breathing at different speeds, which means you've just been listening to Team Cherry hyperventilating for hours. From those breathy horrors came one gentle sound that turned into a compass. Cornifer's distinctive humming that you hear when you're near him was completely improvised during the recording session. Always stuck in my head. The voice actor just randomly started humming, and Team Cherry loved it so much they kept it in. It wasn't in any script or design document, but it was pure spontaneous creativity. Now it's become one of the most recognizable and beloved sounds in the entire game. Players actively use his humming to locate him in new areas, which means this random vocalization accidentally became an important gameplay mechanic. Team Cherry even added special code to make the humming get louder as you get close to him. Sometimes the best game design happens completely by accident, when someone does something silly in a recording booth and everyone realizes it's actually brilliant. If Cornifer's humming calms you, Deep Nest was built to do the exact opposite on purpose. Team Cherry deliberately made a Deep Nest trigger your primal fears. The layered spider sounds, breathing, and heartbeats at frequencies that cause actual anxiety. The darkness isn't just visual, but the audio is specifically mixed to feel oppressive. They studied horror games to learn how to make players feel uncomfortable in a 2D platformer. If you hate Deep Nest, that's not a bug, it's a feature. The area is designed to be genuinely unpleasant, not just difficult. They want you to feel relief when you leave. It's psychological manipulation through game design, and it works perfectly. After engineering fear in Deep Nest, the harshest cut was how the Abyss got trimmed by budget. Speaking of things that couldn't afford to finish properly, let's talk about some cut content. Ever notice how the Abyss feels kind of empty? Well, there's a reason for that. Team Cherry promised this massive expansion for the Abyss as a Kickstarter goal, but they never got enough money for it. We're talking 4 extra bosses and some of the hardest challenges in the game. It was supposed to explain everything about the void where all those creepy vessels came from. Most of that context got axed. Years later, they threw us a bone with that birthplace cutscene, but man, imagine what we could have had. The deepest, darkest part of the game was supposed to be even deeper and darker. And after those Abyss cuts, did the rethink go so far that the Dream Nail was once a portal into people's brains? This one is absolutely wild. So originally, the Dream Nail didn't just read thoughts, and you could literally dive into NPCs' heads. There's actual footage of the knight chopping off a chunk of Elderbug's skull and jumping into his brain like it's a swimming pool. Every character would have had their own dream world with unique challenges. Want to know what Cornifer dreams about while mapping? Oversee Quirrell's memories. Too bad though. Team Cherry decided it was too much work. Now we just get these little thought bubbles. We went from brain surgery exploration to basically mind reading. And honestly, that's probably a little less disturbing. When that dream diving vanished, another promise went with it. Drya was supposed to be alive and you were going to fight her. For those who don't know, she's one of the 5 great knights who protected the White Lady. Team Cherry announced her as a boss fight where she'd gone crazy after the gardens got destroyed, but still had enough honor for a fair duel. Pure nail combat, no spells allowed. Instead, what we get is a pile of dead bodies. She's just laying there, surrounded by mantis corpses. They turned what could have been this legendary knight versus knight showdown into scenery. That's like promising a fight with Darth Vader and delivering a corpse. Losing a knight duel hurt, but the next cut went from tragic to absurd. Team Cherry actually made an entire village of talking snails with little houses on their backs. And no, I'm not joking, it's in the trailers with full backgrounds and everything. But they looked at it and went, nah, this is too Cartoon Network for our depressing bug game. They thought happy snails would ruin the mood while you're exploring a kingdom full of zombies and dead babies. Some fans think that the giant caterpillar Bardoon got the snail's personality since he's weirdly chill for living in a dying world. But seriously, imagine finding a village of snails having tea parties between all the corpses and infection. Comedy gold that we'll never see. That mood check is exactly why the White Palace ends with a twist of cruelty instead of a boss. Since we're talking about expectations getting crushed, let's discuss the biggest anticlimax in gaming. Everyone and their mother expected a boss fight at the end of White Palace. You go through platforming hell, dodge a million saws, and surely there's gotta be some epic battle at the end, right? Wrong. Ari Gibson straight up said that they never planned a boss. The palace is the boss. Those king's molds that keep murdering you is your boss fight. The entire area is basically one long battle against spikes and your own sanity. Plus, finding the Pale King already dead on the throne hits way harder than beating him up would've. Sometimes the best boss fight is no boss fight. Just depression and a dead king. And right after that palace fake out comes a feature that sank before launch. the mysterious Colosseum secret isn't the only feature that got postponed to oblivion. Early trailers showed the knight swimming through acid like it's a pool party, not walking on it with Isma's tear, but actually swimming. This would have opened up entire underwater sections and connected to some lighthouse quest that people found sketches of. The Lake of Void was supposed to have underwater boss fights. Can you imagine fighting void creatures while swimming in liquid darkness? Team Cherry cut it because they realized they'd be developing forever. Plus, let's be real, watching a tiny knight do the butterfly stroke would have looked ridiculous. Sometimes cutting features saves games from themselves. If swimming was real at one point, doesn't the cut lighthouse quest lurking in the files make sudden sense? Hidden in Hollow Knight's game files right now is gaming's most famous piece of cut content. There's a complete lighthouse quest that never made it into the final game, and modders have found all of the pieces. The lighthouse was supposed to be in something called the Lake of Void area. You'd use swimming mechanics to navigate through complete darkness while solving light-based puzzles. There was even going to be a lighthouse keeper NPC with their own tragic backstory, because Team Cherry just loves making us cry. The crazy part is they removed this so late in development that pieces still exist in the code. Speedrunners with special tools can actually glitch into some of these rooms, though they're mostly empty spaces with broken collision. It's like finding ruins of a lost civilization. And once you know about the lighthouse, the Lake of Void shrinking from ocean to puddle makes sense. But not every compromise was as player-friendly as the Essence Farm. The Lake of Void was supposed to be an ocean with massive underwater boss fights. Concept art shows giant void creatures lurking in the depths. Those tendrils that grab you were supposed to be full enemies you would fight while swimming. There was going to be a lighthouse to navigate the darkness. Instead, we got a puddle. The Abyss, already the most atmospheric area, was supposed to have an entire underwater section. Team Cherry cut years of content to actually finish the game. We traded an ocean of possibilities for a bit of a lake of disappointment. After the shoreline shrank, the map needed a quick bridge to hold it together. And sometimes the compromises resulted in areas that feel half-finished for good reason. Fog Canyon almost got cut completely. It was added last minute to connect other areas. That's why it feels so small and different, because it was rushed. The jellyfish were thrown in to make it feel unique. Monomon being there was a panicked decision to give the area purpose. She was supposed to be somewhere else entirely. Fog Canyon is basically a fancy hallway with deadly jellyfish pretending to be a real area. Sometimes you need filler to make the world make sense, even if the filler is trying to kill you with electric jellyfish. That same last-minute energy is why the Hive almost vanished as well. The Hive area was nearly removed from the game because it's so disconnected from everything else. It's completely optional, has basically no major story relevance, and tons of players never even find it. Team Cherry only kept it because they already spent time creating all those bee enemies and didn't want to waste the work. The Hive Knight boss was literally added just to give the area some kind of purpose for existing. Even the Hive Blood charm was a last-minute addition to reward players who actually bothered exploring there. The area feels different from the rest of Hollow Nest because it basically is. It's content that doesn't really fit anywhere but was too good to delete. It's essentially a minigame that got promoted to full area status just because the assets already existed. Even with zones in flux, the Knight's look stayed anchored in real biology. The Knight and other vessels are inspired by real beetles, particularly rhino and stag beetles. Their horns and body shapes reflect the natural armor of these insects. Team Cherry wanted their protagonists to feel grounded in real biology, even within a fantasy world. The choice makes the Knight feel both alien and familiar at the same time. Players may not think about beetles while playing, but the inspiration shows in the design. It's a small detail that connects the game to nature and gives the characters a believable, insect-like quality. Even in fantasy, real-world biology plays a huge role. And if vessels borrow beetle traits, what do 8 eyes quietly tell you about a creature? In Hollow Knight, counting eyes can tell you a lot. Any character with 8 eyes is connected to spiders. This is a simple but effective design choice that helps players recognize species at a glance. Team Cherry used eye count as a quick visual code. You don't need a lore book or dialogue to explain it, the design speaks for itself. Once you notice them, it becomes obvious. It's a clever way to use biology as storytelling. Small details like this make Hollow Nest feel consistent, because even the number of eyes has meaning built into the world. And under that taxonomy game, the hero stays undefined on purpose. Team Cherry deliberately never gave the Knight a canonical gender, always using it in official text and interviews. This wasn't progressive messaging. They wanted players to project themselves onto the character without barriers. The vessels are hollow and empty, so having a gender would imply personality that they're not supposed to possess. Fan debates about the knight's gender completely miss the entire point of vessels being blank slates. The one time someone at Team Cherry accidentally used he in an interview, they immediately corrected themselves. This gender-neutral approach lets every single player see themselves in the protagonist. The community spends time arguing about bug gender, while Team Cherry just wanted a character that could represent anyone and everyone. That blankness contrasts with how tiny the Pale King really is. The Pale King is actually incredibly small compared to what most players imagine in their heads. His throne room is small and his corpse is roughly the same size as the knight you're playing. Players assume he must be this massive, imposing figure because of his godlike importance to the story, but he's literally just a little bug with big ideas. The White Palace's grand architecture and scale make him seem much larger through visual association and clever design tricks. Team Cherry deliberately made the most powerful and important character in the game physically unimpressive and small. This completely subverts player expectations that powerful beings should be physically imposing and large. The fact that Radiance is absolutely massive while the Pale King is tiny shows that size doesn't equal actual power or influence in Hollow Nest. Heck, the player themselves is a wonderful example of this. And getting that tiny king to look right took 7 tries. Team Cherry went through 7 completely different visual designs for the Pale King before setting on the final version we see in the game. It was originally more human-looking, then became more insect-like, then abstract, and almost mechanical in appearance. The iconic crown wasn't even added until the 5th design iteration. His height changed dramatically between versions, where one early design had him smaller than the knight. The final design was chosen just months before the game's release, which is incredibly late for such an important character. Early concept art versions appear through development materials, but most players wouldn't even recognize them as the same character. For the most lore-important character in the entire game, his visual identity sure took forever to get right. While his look changed, the lore colors shifted too. The blue lifeblood creatures were originally failed void experiments by the Pale King, not a completely separate mysterious substance. Blue was just void that had been corrupted or changed differently during the King's research. Team Cherry changed this lore because having 2 mysterious substances felt more interesting than making everything void-related. This is why lifeblood feels so disconnected from the main story, because it was added later as a separate concept. The Abyss was originally supposed to show blue and black void mixing together in the depths. Joni was going to be a void researcher rather than a lifeblood cultivator. The entire blue health system was retroactively justified with completely new lore that had nothing to do with the original concept. Given all those shifting ideas, wasn't a second playable hero baked in from the start? Well, speaking of things that were planned from the very beginning, let's talk about the sequel that everyone has been playing. Silksong isn't just some new idea, because Hornet was supposed to be a playable character from day one. The original Kickstarter mentioned unlocking her after beating the game. Team Cherry cut it because they were broke and the game was already massive, and when they tried making her DLC, it grew too big and became a sequel. So Silksong is really just Team Cherry finally delivering on a 2014 promise. Kickstarter backers got Silksong free because technically they already paid for a playable Hornet 8 years ago. The sequel is just unfinished business from the first game, and when they finally doubled down on bosses, they built the Grim Troop backwards from the Nightmare. Team Cherry designed Nightmare King Grim first, then worked completely backwards to create regular Grim and the entire DLC around him. They wanted to make the ultimate boss fight experience and reverse engineered everything else to justify its existence. This is why Nightmare King Grim feels more polished and complete than regular Grim, because he's the original version that everything else was built to support. The entire troop, the ritual mechanics, and even the story were created just to make NKG make sense. Even the incredible music was composed for Nightmare King first, then simplified for the regular fight. Team Cherry admitted this backwards design process was completely insane, but it worked perfectly. Most DLC starts with story concepts, but they started with, what if we made an impossible boss fight? And built everything around that singular idea. While combat was sculpted, the big story guardians got a late visual glow-up. Early in development, all 3 Dreamers had exactly the same mask design. Lurien, Monomon, and Hera were basically just 3 copies of the same character, which is pretty boring when you think about it. The unique masks that reflect their personalities came much later in development. This is why if you look at old concept maps, they show the same symbol for all Dreamer locations. Team Cherry realized having 3 identical Guardians was lame and gave each one their own personality through their mask designs. Lurien's ornate mask, Monomon's scholarly look, and Hera's primal design all came from this realization. You can still see some confusion in the final game because changing everything would have broken the sequence of events they'd already programmed. Even with clearer masks, some figures were left mysterious on purpose. The Forge Daughter is one of the few characters without a confirmed species. Even Team Cherry never tied her to any real insect. She simply exists as a mystery. That decision adds to her strange, otherworldly presence in the game. Not everything in Hollow Nest has to fit neatly into biology. Sometimes leaving things unexplained makes them more memorable. The Forge Daughter proves that ambiguity can be a design choice. Instead of breaking immersion, it sparks curiosity and discussion among fans. She may not have roots in nature, but that mystery only makes her stand out even more. That taste for mystery didn't stop players from feeling the sting of broken promises in charms. If corpse furniture wasn't dark enough for you, how about false promises that still haunt us to this day? When Godmaster was announced, Team Cherry promised we could glorify our charms to make them stronger. It was right there in the official announcement. Then they just didn't do it. Later on Discord, they admitted that it was too much work. Imagine Wayward Compass, but it reveals secret rooms, or Gathering Swarm that actually attacks enemies. The whole system got thrown in the trash. We could have had upgraded charms that completely changed how we play. Instead, we got what we got. And sometimes the coolest features are the ones that die in development, and it's a shame when they do. If some overpowered ideas died on the cutting room floor, how did Quick Focus survive with just a heavy slot tax? The Quick Focus charm that speeds up healing was almost completely removed from the game for being way too powerful. When playtesters got their hands on it, they basically never took it off because it was just so useful. Team Cherry seriously considered cutting it entirely, but instead decided to make it cost 3 whole charm slots to balance it out. Even at that steep cost, most players still consider it absolutely essential and never take it off. The charm basically breaks the game's careful healing system, where you're supposed to find safe moments to heal slowly, not spam it in the middle of combat. Team Cherry kept it because removing something that testers loved felt wrong. But this decision probably made the entire game easier than they originally intended. And right after that Survivor, Grimchild got nerfed into near uselessness. Grimchild was originally supposed to be incredibly powerful, but Team Cherry nerfed it so hard, it almost became worthless. The original version did triple damage and had seeking projectiles that automatically targeted enemies. Playtesters never unequipped it because it made combat trivially easy. The final version we got is intentionally mediocre to maintain game balance, which is pretty disappointing. The evolution stages were supposed to be way more dramatic and impressive, but they got toned down significantly. The fully upgraded Grimchild in the final game is actually weaker than the very first version's base form during development. Team Cherry chose overall game balance over making players feel properly rewarded for completing the questline. That's why so many players feel disappointed by Grimchild. It was deliberately neutered from its original awesome design. Meanwhile, Quick Slash sliced the boss balance to ribbons. Quick Slash was almost completely removed from making the entire game way too easy to exploit. It increases your attack speed so dramatically that boss AI patterns can't properly react to your damage output. When combined with fragile strength, it completely breaks most boss fights by allowing ridiculous damage per second. Team Cherry left it in because removing popular charms felt wrong and would anger players, but they do admit that it was a mistake. Speedrunners abuse Quick Slash to skip entire boss phases and trivialize difficult encounters. The charm system wasn't properly tested with multiple damage upgrades stacking together, and that's why late game balance feels off because players can achieve damage output that was never intended by the developers. Team Cherry accidentally made their night game easier for mages than actual knights. Magic added to the issue a lot, with Spell Twister almost breaking the game. Spell Twister reducing soul costs for magic was originally going to be completely free, with 0 charm notches required. Team Cherry realized that free spell cost reduction would utterly destroy the game's balance and make magic completely overpowered. Even at its current 2-notch cost, many players still consider it overpowered compared to other options. The charm system's biggest balance problem is the inconsistent cost-to-benefit ratios throughout the entire game. Some 3-notch charms are significantly worse than certain 1-notch ones, which makes no sense. Team Cherry admitted they simply didn't have enough development time to properly balance every charm interaction. Spell builds being optimal over nail builds wasn't intentional, and they just didn't thoroughly test magic combinations. And if spells felt cheeky, the compass started as a joke about games. Wayward Compass requiring a charm slot just to show your location on the map was originally Team Cherry's joke about modern gaming conventions. They thought it was hilarious that knowing where you are would require special equipment in their old-school game. They expected players to equip it, briefly memorize the area layouts, then remove it for something more useful. Instead, it became the most used charm in the entire game, according to official statistics. Most players never unequip it, proving they actually need consistent position markers. Team Cherry accidentally created what they consider a mandatory charm by making fun of what they saw as hand-holding in modern games. The joke became reality when players demonstrated they actually needed the assistance that Team Cherry was mocking. And with all that charm chaos, did one trinket secretly wink at another game? The Dashmaster charm's appearance is a direct tribute to Sans from Undertale. It's blue and white with a shape that resembles his distinctive head. Even the effect of making dodging easier references Sans' ability to dodge absolutely everything during his infamous boss fight. Team Cherry added this as a tribute to Toby Fox without asking for permission first, which was common and accepted practice among indie developers, showing mutual respect. Players spotted the connection immediately, but Team Cherry never officially confirmed the reference. The charm being relatively hidden in the game was completely intentional, and only Undertale fans were likely to find it naturally. Putting meme characters as secret references in your serious bug apocalypse game is pretty bold. Even without a king to duel, one arena still fought its way into the game. The Coliseum of Fools wasn't even supposed to be in the game because it was a failed Kickstarter goal. But Team Cherry looked at the game and realized they needed somewhere to test combat skills, so they just crammed it in at the last second. William Pellin said they almost made it downloadable content instead. Without it, there would have been this weird empty spot at the top of Kingdom's Edge. Oh, and get this. The team claims there's still some secret hidden in the Coliseum that nobody has found. They said it might be explored in the future. Still waiting on that one, Team Cherry. And while that arena stayed, entire rooms slipped the team's memory. But here's where Team Cherry's sadism backfired in the most hilarious way possible. Team Cherry thought players would find all the secrets, but people data mined stuff the developers literally forgot existed. There are half-finished rooms floating in the code that aren't connected to anything. Empty areas with weird pathways and no textures, some stretch on forever with no point. Before updates, modders could access those ghost rooms. Gibson and Pellin admitted they couldn't remember making them. They completely underestimated how crazy the community would get about finding secrets. People tore the code apart looking for mysteries and found rooms that even Team Cherry forgot about. Out of that grind came myths, including a Coliseum secret that refuses to appear. And because their circumstances were so desperate, Team Cherry sometimes said things they probably shouldn't have. William Pellin once said that there's a secret in the Coliseum nobody's found. The community has spent years looking for it. Data miners have torn code apart and found nothing. It might be cut content he forgot about, or maybe it's in Silksong, or maybe he was just messing with us. People still ask about it constantly, and Pellin probably regrets ever mentioning it. Imagine accidentally creating a mystery that doesn't exist and watching thousands of people search for nothing. The greatest secret in Hollow Knight might be that there is no secret. Before fans wrote themselves into the game, physical media slipped in secrets of its own. If you bought a physical copy of Hollow Knight, the manual contained hidden lore that cleared up years of community debates. It often confirmed the bug species of several characters that fans had been guessing about for ages. Most players never noticed because manuals have become rare in the digital era. Collectors, though, were sitting on secret answers the whole time. Team Cherry used print media to sneak in extra details that never appeared in the digital version. It proves that even in a world dominated by downloads, physical editions can hold unique value for those who pay attention. From those fan notes in stone, the Void itself had a secret to whisper next. The Shrine of Believers is filled with messages from Kickstarter backers, and some of them slipped in clever cultural references. You can see nods to Lovecraft, Dark Souls, and even some memes. Team Cherry allowed these personal notes to become part of the game's world, blending fan creativity with official content. It's a unique way to honor the people who funded the project while also giving players little Easter eggs to find. What started as lore turned into community lore. These hidden messages prove that fan support isn't just financial aid, and it's written directly into the world of Hollow Nest. Once you notice how the Void quietly rewires your behavior, you start seeing how the art quietly recycles itself. The Void Heart charm doesn't just stop your shade from attacking you after death, it actually stops all Void creatures from being hostile towards you. This includes the siblings climbing out of the abyss during that haunting sequence. Before you get Void Heart, they grab at you menacingly. After you equip it, they climb past you peacefully. completely ignoring your presence. The charm basically makes every void creature recognize you as their rightful king and ruler. This massive lore implication is never explained in dialogue or cutscenes. It just happens through enemy AI changes that most players never notice. Team Cherry hit one of the game's most biggest story reveals in behavioral mechanics that you can only discover by revisiting areas with different equipment. And if art got reused, some mechanics got reused to help players as well. But while the voices are completely made up, some visual elements are just recycled from earlier ideas. When it came to that unused Shade Soul variant in the files that looks like Abyss Shriek, well, they just recycled it. Originally, Shade Soul was going to have multiple versions with different shapes and damage. They simplified it but left the unused spirits in the code. Abyss Shriek looks like Shade Soul because it literally was supposed to be the Shade Soul. Classic game development tactics, because why make new art when you can reuse old art? These ghost sprites in the code tell the story of features that almost got extinguished. Digital archaeology through forgotten sprites. Did that reuse ever turn into something the devs left in on purpose to help you grind? Sometimes Team Cherry recycled ideas in ways that actually helped players instead of confusing them. And in that room in Greenpath where you can farm essence from birds, Team Cherry knows about it and left it in on purpose. Originally, essence was going to be super rare, forcing you to beat every dream boss. But they realized that was too harsh, so they added some renewable sources. It's boring but functional. Classic Team Cherry. They could have made essence farming fun, but sometimes you just need to let players grind if they want. That one room with respawning birds is their gift to completionists who don't want to fight dream warriors. That player-friendly reuse sits next to a leftover that never got fully cleaned up. Soul vessels originally needed 2 fragments, not 3. Sly still says his second fragment, quote, completes a vessel, but they forgot to change his dialogue. The third fragment was added for better pacing during testing. This kind of mistake is all over the game from development changes. 2 fragments made progression too fast, so they added a third. These dialogue inconsistencies are like archaeology, but every mistake tells a story about what changed. The game is full of these little fossils from earlier versions that they just never cleaned up. Those little fossils in the dialogue pair nicely with a literal fossil in a jar. In the Tower of Love, there's a bottled crawl lid with the beta design and no spikes on its shell. Someone at Team Cherry deliberately placed this old sprite as an Easter egg. It's preserved in a jar like a museum piece of the game's development. Most players never notice because, who stares at a background jar? This tiny development joke is hidden in plain sight. The developers left breadcrumbs of their process throughout the world. A beta enemy preserved in formaldehyde for careful observers. Cute dev jokes aside, some choices were made purely to hurt you. Speaking of features that were definitely designed to hurt us, let's talk about intentional player torture. The Path of Pain didn't just happen to trap you because it's designed to. About that wall slamming shut behind you, Ari Gibson said, quote, "We didn't want players to chicken out halfway through. That is straight up evil. You can't leave. Either you beat it or quit to the menu like a coward." And your reward for this torture was a sad cutscene about the Pale King and baby Hollow Knight. No achievement, no special charm, just feels. Gibson basically admitted they wanted to watch players suffer. The entire thing is a trap designed to break you, and they're proud of it. And if that trap felt cruel, the follow-up was personal. Ari Gibson openly admitted that the Path of Pain was designed as personal revenge against players who complained that the White Palace was too easy. He got genuinely annoyed watching speedrunners make his carefully crafted platforming challenges look like child's play, so he created the Path of Pain as something that couldn't be cheesed with special abilities or helpful charms. It is pure, brutal execution and nothing else. Gibson personally tested every single section to make sure it was just barely possible to complete. The wall that slams shut to prevent you from giving up was his idea to make everyone suffer equally. And the fact that your reward is just a sad cutscene with more lore was intentional salt in the wound. Gibson basically said, "You want hard? Here's hard." After revenge platforming, was the meanest idea actually a charm that almost shipped? And if you think Path of Pain was sadistic, you should hear about the charm that would have been pure evil incarnate. William Pellin wanted to add a Zote charm that kills you in one hit. This isn't a joke because he said this in an actual interview. It would have been the ultimate meme charm for masochists. Picture fighting absolute radiance while wearing a charm that makes you die instantly. Even Zote's wooden nail is more useful than that. Pellin said they might add it in an update, but never did. Honestly, it would have been perfect for Godmaster, where people were already doing ridiculous challenges. At least then, Zote would have been useful for something, you know, killing players faster. Even without that joke charm, the game still messes with your head between fights. Team Cherry deliberately placed save benches just far enough to cause maximum player anxiety and stress. They actually studied player stress patterns and positioned saves at calculated tension points for psychological impact. The walk from any bench to a boss room is carefully designed to be long enough to build a genuine dread about losing progress. That's why some bench placements seem needlessly cruel, because they absolutely are intentionally cruel. The developers wanted death to have real emotional weight through the fear of losing progress and having to repeat long walks. Modern games put checkpoints right outside boss rooms, but Team Cherry wanted players to suffer for their mistakes. They literally engineered the game to stress you out between save points, and the relief of finding a new bench is completely calculated psychology. That slow burn stress peaks when the floor itself turns against you. The Radiance's disappearing platform pattern isn't random at all. It's specifically programmed to screw you over as much as possible. Team Cherry created an algorithm that tracks your movement and deliberately removes the platforms you're most likely to jump to next. That's why it feels genuinely unfair when you know all the attack patterns. The platforms aren't just disappearing randomly, they're actively trying to kill you in the most frustrating way possible. Speedrunners have actually mapped these patterns and found ways to manipulate them, but for regular players, the arena itself is quite literally your enemy. Team Cherry wanted the true final boss to feel oppressive and hopeless, so they made the ground beneath your feet actively hostile. And if the ground bullied you, Godmaster tried to break you outright. Before Silksong came out, at least we got Godmaster to torture ourselves with. Godmaster's bindings are brutal, but there was supposed to be a fifth one that removed your dash completely. It was just stupid. The 4 bindings we got are already insane. Doing all 4 at once was supposed to be impossible, but someone did it within a week. Team Cherry constantly underestimates how insane their players are. They design impossible challenges and players beat them while blindfolded. The community is definitely scarier than any boss. Not every pain came from systems though, because some came from people who paid to be there. Tiso, that cocky warrior who dies pathetically in the Colosseum, was named after a real person. Kickstarter backer Tiso Spencer. Spencer paid for the character creation tier and specifically requested a warrior character who thought he was better than everyone else. Team Cherry absolutely delivered by making him die off-screen in the most embarrassing way possible. You only see his corpse after beating Booty Mollusk spits it out like garbage. The best part, Spencer apparently loved his pathetic death and thought it was hilarious. Paying actual money to be immortalized as a complete failure in a video game is peak Kickstarter energy. At least other backer characters like Cloth got to die heroically instead of being monster food. After that paid humiliation was one boss literally designed by a developer's mom, the Dream Warrior Marmu. That happy little caterpillar ghost who just wants to play was actually designed by Zara Pellin, William Pellin's mother. She was a Kickstarter backer who got to design a character and made the most wholesome thing in a game about dead children and plague. Can you imagine William having to fight his mom's cheerful creation hundreds of times during testing and debugging? The family dynamics must have been hilarious. Marmu being one of the easier Dream Warriors was probably intentional because William didn't want to make his mother's character frustrating for players. Having family members design bosses that you then have to kill repeatedly during game development is some seriously weird workplace energy. At least she made something cute instead of nightmare fuel. From wholesome family vibes, we drop into the most heartbreaking random encounter in the game. Menderberg, the little guy who fixes that sign you break in the crossroads, has only a 2% chance of spawning, and dies instantly if you hit him even once. He drops a journal entry revealing he just wanted to fix things and make the world better. After his death, his house opens up and you can read his diary about being completely alone and lonely. Team Cherry created what might be the saddest character death in gaming and made it completely random and missable. Most players never even know he existed. Those few who accidentally encounter and kill him feel genuine crushing guilt afterward. His diary reveals that he actually saw the knight as a friend who kept giving him purpose by breaking things for him to repair. You killed the only bug in Hollow Nest who genuinely liked your destructive presence and found joy in it. That quiet tragedy lines up with another fate that only triggers if you make it happen. Cloth's heroic death fighting the Traitor Lord has always completely been optional, not a fixed story event like most players think. If you don't rescue her earlier in the game, she never shows up for that final battle at all. Most players assume her death is mandatory and feel terrible guilt about it, but it's actually avoidable through ignorance. Team Cherry wanted player choices to have real consequences without telegraphing them obviously. Not bothering to save random NPCs can completely lock you out of their entire storylines. Cloth surviving because you didn't trigger her events is the same way of saying that sometimes ignorance actually preserves life. Players who accidentally kept her alive by not being thorough explorers actually got the happiest ending possible. Sometimes not being a completionist is actually more merciful. And while some choices can spare friends, some friendships were just cut for time. The last stag, remembering that other stags are still alive, was supposed to have a much more emotional payoff with a full reunion cutscene. Team Cherry cut most of it for time constraints but kept the egg revelation. Players complained that the storyline felt rushed and unsatisfying after helping him recover his memories throughout the game. Originally, you would have seen young stags hatching from the eggs and calling the old stag grandfather in a heartwarming scene. Instead, the emotional weight got reduced to a single line of dialogue that many players missed entirely. This is why the stag questline feels incomplete and unsatisfying, because it is unfinished. Team Cherry had planned much more stag-related content, but had to cut it to meet their release deadline. That same time crunch sliced through side stories, including a whole romance. Cornifer and Izelda originally had way more relationship development and backstory that got completely cut from the final game. There were entire quest lines showing how they first met and explaining why Izelda chooses to stay in Dirtmouth instead of exploring with her husband. Players would have actually helped them work through and reconcile their completely different life goals and dreams. Team Cherry cut most of it for pacing reasons, but still kept subtle hints in their existing dialogue. This is why the relationship feels much deeper and more complex than what is actually shown, because originally it was much more developed. The map pin system was going to be more complex, with Cornifer making personal comments about your exploration process. The full story would have made them the most emotionally developed couple in the entire game. With stories trimmed for pacing, one obsession got toned down because it crossed a line. Bretta's obsession with whoever saves her from the false knight was originally way more disturbing, with genuine stalking implications that made players uncomfortable. Her diary entries included disturbing details about secretly following the knight around at Hollow Nest and watching from hiding spots. Team Cherry significantly toned it down after playtester feedback that it felt too uncomfortable and crossed lines. The Zote subplot where he steals her affections was specifically added to make her obsession feel less like dangerous stalking behavior. Originally, she would actually appear watching you in various areas before quickly disappearing when spotted. The creepy basement shrine we see in the final game is actually the toned-down version of her obsession. Sometimes player feedback prevents developers from going too far into genuinely disturbing territory. Dialing back Bretta set the stage for flipping another character entirely. Salubra seems sweet and harmless with her little kisses, right? Well, originally she was planned to be one of the game's biggest villains. That's right, the bug who sells you charms and gives you that weird blessing was supposed to betray you in the worst way possible. Her obsession with charms wasn't meant to be cute and quirky. It was supposed to be genuinely sinister and creepy. The blessing she gives you was actually going to turn into a curse that would activate during a crucial boss fight, basically sabotaging you when you needed help the most. Team Cherry changed their minds because they realized they already had way too many tragic NPCs in their depressing bug world. That's why she looks absolutely terrifying but acts like your sweet grandmother. Her design is literally a reformed villain. And when roles flipped, karma showed up for the greediest shopkeeper. When Leg Eater gets eaten by Divine during the Grim Troop quest, that's not a random event. It's intentional karma from Team Cherry. This guy's been scamming bugs with overpriced fragile charms for who knows how long, and his death is basically the developer's way of delivering justice. His name tells you he probably eats customers' legs when they can't pay their debts. The fact that Divine turns his charms unbreakable afterward is the game saying, this is how business should have been done. all along. Players who feel bad about his death are missing the point. He's explicitly evil and predatory. Team Cherry hid this narrative justice behind an obscure mechanic interaction that most players never even see. While Predators got payback, one bug just kept reading and stayed normal. Relic Seeker Lem might genuinely be the only mentally stable character in all of Hollow Nest. He's literally just a historian who wants to study ancient artifacts and pay fair prices for interesting finds. No tragic backstory, no infection, no existential crisis about the meaning of life. He's just doing his job while the entire world dies around him. Team Cherry said they needed at least one completely normal person for contrast against all the tragedy. Lem doesn't even comment on the apocalypse happening right outside of his door. He's completely focused on his academic work, totally unbothered by the cosmic horror surrounding him. This makes him either the sanest character in the game or possibly the most insane, depending on your perspective. His complete normalcy in this nightmare world is somehow creepier than actual monsters. Back in the Abyss, the cuts get sharper than any nail. Those creepy void tendrils in the Abyss that grab you and drag you down were originally complete enemies with health bars and everything. You would have fought them while swimming through the Void Sea in what was basically going to be Hollow Knight's water temple. Each tendril was connected to massive creatures lurking below, and we're talking about void krakens made of liquid darkness. Team Cherry had to cut them down to simple environmental hazards when they removed the swimming mechanics from the game. The concept art shows these incredible void beings that we never got to fight. What we see grabbing us are just the fingertips of enormous monsters that were supposed to be epic boss battles. The Abyss was going to be so much more dangerous and exciting. If entire monsters vanished, did one iconic boss actually smush two fights into one? Nosk was supposed to be two completely separate boss fights, one shapeshifter and one giant spider creature. Team Cherry had to combine them because they literally ran out of room space in Deep Nest during development. The shapeshifting aspect barely made it into the final version, which is why Nosk's mimicry feels so underused and rushed. The spider form was going to be found much deeper in Deep Nest without any disguise mechanics at all. Merging these two cool concepts created the weird hybrid boss that transforms too quickly for players to really appreciate either form. Players who think Nosk's concept feels wasted and underdeveloped are absolutely right. Two genuinely interesting boss fight ideas got smashed together into one confused fight because of development constraints. It's a classic case of compromise hurting the final product. And when concepts collided, one horror crawled straight out of a real nightmare. The collector boss, that creepy tall figure who hoards grubs in glass jars, came directly from someone at Team Cherry's real nightmare. A team member had a very specific dream about a disturbing figure putting things in jars while laughing maniacally, and they decided to turn it into a boss fight. The unsettling laugh and weird movement animations were all attempts to recreate that exact feeling from that nightmare. This is exactly why the Collector feels so different from other bosses in the game. It's literally using nightmare logic instead of normal game design. The team member who originally had the dream reportedly hates fighting their own creation, which is pretty understandable. Turning personal nightmares into game content that customers have to experience is some seriously intense workplace sharing. Right below that fallen crown, devotion took a messy, heartfelt shape. During Defender's hidden room filled with poop statues of the Five Knights, it isn't just gross comedy, and it's genuinely one of the most touching things in the game. He's been carefully crafting these monuments to his dead friends for years in complete isolation, using the only materials he has available. The incredible detail on each statue shows he remembers every single one of them perfectly after all this time. That's his way of honoring fallen comrades and keeping their memory alive in the only way he can. William Pellin said Dung Defender is his personal favorite character because he maintains hope and loyalty despite everything falling apart. The poop aesthetic masks genuine grief and unwavering friendship. Players who just laugh at the silly dung statues are missing one of the game's most emotional environmental stories. After all of that spectacle, the Pale King's end lands in silence that sets up the heartbreak to come. When you knock the Pale King's corpse off the throne, that entire animation is one continuous take with no cuts. Team Cherry spent days getting the physics right so his body falls naturally. Most players rush through to grab the charm, missing the careful animation. If you wait, his crown rolls away and stops perfectly in frame. The scene was supposed to have dialogue, but Team Cherry decided silence was more powerful. No boss fight, no dramatic music, just pushing a dead king off his chair. Sometimes the most important character deserves the quietest death. In that silence, Hollow Knight almost spoke, hinting at the darker ideas still buried in the files. The Hollow Knight boss fight has unused dialogue hidden in the game files that shows it was originally going to speak during the battle. The cut lines include heartbreaking phrases like "father" and "kill me" that would have made the fight even more emotionally devastating. Team Cherry removed all the dialogue because they felt it was too explicit about the tragedy and would hurt the emotional impact. The Pure Vessel fight was supposed to show what the Hollow Knight looked like before infection, which explains why it appears so different. They decided that silent suffering would be more impactful than spoken pleas for help or death. Players who discovered these hidden voice lines created elaborate theories about when they might trigger, but the truth is much simpler. Team Cherry just decided that silence was sadder and more powerful than words could ever be. Set aside the cut features for a second, because the bleakest idea hiding in the files was a bench made of your dead kin. All these cut features pale in comparison to the most disturbing thing they almost put in the game. Deep in the game's files, there's a bench made entirely of dead vessels. Your dead siblings. You would literally save your game by sitting on a pile of your family's corpses. It was probably meant for the Abyss, where all the failed vessels ended up. Team Cherry made the sprites, but never put them in the game. It was like, oh, time to save. Let me just rest on my dead brothers and sisters really quick. Even for a game about child sacrifice and plague, that's pretty dark. Hollow Knight already has enough dead children without making furniture out of them. Ever find the Radiance fight literally hard to stomach? The Radiance fight's swirling orange dream particles and flashing effects can cause actual motion sickness and nausea in some players. Team Cherry didn't consider accessibility issues like this during development, which was unfortunately common for indie games at the time. The combination of the spinning background and bright flashing lights triggered genuine physical discomfort in players who were sensitive to motion. They toned down the effects somewhat, but some people still can't fight the Radiance without feeling genuinely sick. This means certain players cannot complete the true ending because their biology reacts badly to the graphics. Team Cherry learned about photosensitivity and motion sensitivity concerns too late in development. Fixing it would have required completely redesigning the entire visual language of the most important fight, so they left it mostly unchanged. Whatever the roots, players bent the systems to their will. But regardless of what inspired the design, speedrunners found ways to completely break it. Here's a secret for achievement hunters that you might not have known. What is it? Pausing the game stops the speedrun timer. The game doesn't count paused time. You could pause for 3 hours, order a pizza, watch a movie, come back, and still get that 5-hour achievement. Speedrunners discovered this when digging through the code. That's why real speedrunners use external timers, because the in-game one is basically on easy mode. Team Cherry probably knew most players aren't speedrunners and wanted that achievement to actually be possible for normal humans. So if you're struggling with that speedrun achievement, just remember, the pause button is your friend. Then came the find that didn't just bend rules. It launched the night across Hollow Nest. Of course, actual speedrunners don't need that pause trick because they found something way more broken. A speedrunner named Scruffy broke the entire game with one discovery. He found you could trick the game into thinking you're grabbing walls when you're not. This wall cling storage lets you maintain dash speed across entire rooms. You fly through areas like a rocket. It works by canceling Cyclone Slash at the exact right frame while mashing attack. This discovery dropped speedrun records by minutes. Team Cherry never patched it because they apparently love watching people break their game. Sometimes the best features are the ones that aren't supposed to exist. When the design bites, the community bites back with creativity. That speedrun trick where you store inputs during room transitions was completely accidental. Team Cherry's room loading accidentally keeps input buffers active. Speedrunners use this to start moving before the screen loads. Team Cherry saw this and decided it was too cool to patch. The game is full of these happy accidents that became speedrunner techniques. They could have fixed dozens of these exploits, but chose not to. Watching speedrunners break their game became entertainment for the developers. They'd rather see creative players do impossible things than have a perfectly polished game. Still, the devs could be generous when creativity impressed them, which set the stage for tech to matter even more. Team Cherry started watching speedruns of their own game during development and actually changed things based on what they saw. Some glitches and skips were deliberately left in because they looked cool and impressive. Others got patched because they broke the game's progression too badly. The developers became genuine fans of their own speedrun community before the game was even finished. This relationship influenced major design decisions and even DLC content. Godmaster exists partly because speedrunners wanted boss rush modes. The path of pain exists because speedrunners made regular platforming look way too easy. Most developers would patch out exploits immediately, but Team Cherry celebrated them instead. The speedrun community helped shape the final game, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. So what happens when the hardware itself turns into a secret difficulty setting? Here is something wild. Playing Hollow Knight at 120 frames per second makes the game noticeably easier. It's not just the smoother visuals, the controls feel way more responsive. Things that felt impossible at 60 FPS suddenly click into place at 120. Players who struggled before suddenly look like pros. Not because they leveled up in skill, but because their monitor did. Team Cherry never designed around high refresh rates, so it's like an actual difficulty slider built right into your hardware. Want the Knight to feel faster and sharper? Forget grinding charms and you can just get a better screen. Sometimes technology does the heavy lifting. From hardware quirks to hardcore choices, the conversation flips to saves that vanish. And sometimes the community's own masochistic tendencies inspired Team Cherry to add features they never intended. That hardcore permadeath mode everyone loves was a total accident. Team Cherry saw players deleting their own saves when they died during testing and thought, well, if they're gonna do it anyway. The mode literally just checks if you died and then deletes your save. That's the entire code. No fancy programming, just dead equals delete. They added Steel Djinn to give Steel Soul players something special, but the mode itself was a last-minute addition. One of the most popular features exists because players were already torturing themselves, so Team Cherry made it official. And when voices rested, the jokes kept on going. The Eternal Ordeal, where you fight endless waves of Grey Prince Zote, was added as a complete joke mode that Team Cherry never expected anyone to actually complete. You need to kill exactly 57 Zotes to win and unlock a menu style. They picked the number 57 completely at random, and it has absolutely no significance whatsoever. They genuinely thought that nobody would bother with such a ridiculous challenge, but they severely underestimated player dedication and stubbornness. Some masochistic completionists have killed thousands upon thousands of Zotes just because they can. The entire mode was created in a single afternoon as a meme, with no real rewards beyond bragging rights. Team Cherry accidentally created an endurance challenge that some players actually prefer to the main game. Even in death, Zote continues winning by wasting everyone's time. After that overdose of Zote, the numbers themselves became the punchline. Fighting Grey Prince Zote 10 different times, with them getting progressively stronger, was Team Cherry's way of trolling completionist players. Nobody asked for multiple Zote difficulty levels, but they added 10 anyway just to mess with people. Each version has slightly different attack patterns and significantly more health than the last. The golden statue reward at the end is deliberately one of the worst prizes for one of the most challenging completion tasks in the game. Team Cherry knew players would absolutely hate this grinding requirement, but they did it anyway because they thought it was funny. This is pure developer trolling, making players fight their joke character 10 separate times for essentially nothing. The fact that dedicated players actually do this proves that gamers will endure absolutely anything for that clean 100%. And speaking of things that don't add up, the game's completion percentage becomes its own running joke. The game's 112 completion percentage makes absolutely no mathematical sense, and Team Cherry knows it and just doesn't care. They kept adding new content throughout development and just arbitrarily increased the percentage number beyond 100 without any logic. They even joked about making future DLC that'll push it all the way to 200% completion just to confuse people even more. The percentage system was supposed to be replaced with a completely different completion metric, but they never got around to changing it. Players who try to understand why it's specifically 112% are way overthinking it. Team Cherry just kept adding numbers until it felt right to them. This completely arbitrary percentage system became iconic and beloved despite being totally meaningless. The developers turned their inability to properly plan content scope into an accidental meme that fans love. When names matter this much, did a lawyer end up renaming the final DLC at the last second? The final DLC was originally called Gods and Glory, but right before launch, Team Cherry had to change the name to Godmaster. Why? Because of trademark issues. Basically, someone else owned the phrase, and lawyers forced the change. Fans were confused because the original name sounded cooler, but the content itself didn't change. It's one of those times when legal red tape shaped the game more than creative decisions. While Godmaster may not roll off the tongue as well, at least the DLC still delivered epic content. Sometimes the biggest bosses aren't in the game and instead in the trademark offices. I'm looking at you, Pocket Bear. Names changed too, though sometimes only on the box. PlayStation and Xbox players might remember the Void Heart Edition. Sounds mysterious, right? In reality, it's the same base game plus all the DLC, just with a fancier name. That's it. No extra quests, no hidden bosses, no bonus lore. Meanwhile, the Switch version had all the same content, but never got the shiny title. It's marketing at its most confusing. Players still Google what makes Void Heart special and find, well, nothing. It's a reminder that sometimes edition names are just there to make products sound new when they're not. In this case, Void Heart was pure branding fluff and nothing more. That back and forth with players continued after launch in a big way. The birthplace cutscene that shows the knight's origin and creation wasn't in Hollow Knight when it first released. Team Cherry added it over a year later in the free Lifeblood update after players complained that the Abyss felt empty and pointless despite being crucial to the story. The emotional scene where you witness the Pale King and see the young Hollow Knight was all added retroactively. This means that if you only played the game at launch, you missed out on one of the most important lore revelations in the entire story. Team Cherry basically admitted that the Abyss was unfinished in the original release and fixed it with free DLC. It's crazy to think that such a pivotal story moment was added as an afterthought to address player complaints. The same blend of design and desperation can also be seen in how quickly new areas were built. The impressive Hall of Gods with all those detailed boss statues and Godmaster was added during the last week of development in a massive crunch effort. Originally, you were just going to select bosses from a boring menu screen like most games. Team Cherry decided that was way too simple and basic for their vision, so they worked frantically to create an entire atmospheric location. Each boss's specific pose was carefully chosen to represent that boss's unique personality and fighting style. The Ascended and Radiant difficulty markers were added even later in an even more rushed time frame. That's why some statues look less polished than others, and they were literally made under extreme time pressure. The entire Hall of Gods was basically a UI solution that became a full location because Team Cherry couldn't do anything simply. And when plans shifted, whole characters sometimes appeared at the 11th hour. The Godseeker character was added super late to Godmaster. Originally, you'd just access pantheons through a boring statue. Team Cherry decided that was lame and created the Godseeker in about a week. Her whole personality and obsession with gods was rushed. The cocoon in Junk Pit was added to the base game retroactively. She feels disconnected from the lore because she literally is disconnected. The DLC was supposed to just be boss fights, but Team Cherry couldn't help adding story. Even pure gameplay needs narrative justification in their minds. Ever notice the crossroads turning hostile right after a key milestone instead of on a timer? The Forgotten Crossroads becoming infested and hostile isn't random timing. It's carefully scripted to trigger after you kill the broken vessel or obtain Monarch Wings. Team Cherry wanted players to feel like their actions had direct consequences on the world around them. The infection spreading is tied to specific story triggers, not just time passing or random events. This creates the powerful illusion of a living world that reacts and changes based on your choices. Speedrunners can actually keep the crossroads clean indefinitely by avoiding certain progression triggers entirely. The psychological impact of returning to your safe starting area and finding everything corrupted and dangerous was completely deliberate. Team Cherry wanted to violate the standard gaming convention of areas staying static and unchanging. Your progress makes the world worse. And while the world reacted to your actions, the maps were quietly being polished behind the scenes. For years, patch notes kept saying minor map fixes without ever explaining what those fixes ever were. Players noticed their maps felt smoother to use, but had no clue why. Team Cherry was secretly polishing the cartography system, making paths line up better and navigation feel easier. It's kind of funny because most players never realized their maps were constantly evolving behind the scenes. This obsessive attention to detail meant exploring always felt slightly better with each update. Whether it was fixing visual clarity or collision issues, maps were quietly being perfected while players kept enjoying the ride. Amid those invisible tweaks, tiny visual debates raged inside the studio. Every patch came with vague notes like various fixes and tweaks, which left players guessing. Behind those words, Team Cherry was constantly changing the game in ways no one could fully track. Some fixes were tiny, others were big, but most never got explained. Over time, the game evolved in invisible ways, becoming smoother and more polished without anyone noticing exactly when. These secret patches could fix bugs players didn't even know existed or quietly adjust balance. It created mystery around every update, where nobody knew exactly what had changed. This quiet perfectionism became part of the game's legacy. While artists argued over a dash color, words themselves became weapons for one very delusional warrior. While speedrunners were breaking the game externally, Team Cherry was having their own internal battles over tiny details. The Shade Cloak's purple effect caused actual arguments at Team Cherry. Originally, it was pure black void energy, but testers couldn't tell when it was active. They tried white, but it also looked too much like a regular dash. The purple we got was a compromise that annoyed the art team. Ari Gibson wanted it darker to match the void theme, but gameplay clarity won. There are unused sprites showing different colors, including a weird green version. Some artists at Team Cherry still think the purple just looks wrong. It's perfect for gameplay, but aesthetically controversial. Even game developers fight about colors. From a bottled relic to a hollow ego, the game loves hiding meaning in plain sight. Zote's nail, Life Ender, can't hurt anything because it's made of shellwood, but there's deep lore here. Zote believes names have power, and he thinks calling it Life Ender makes it deadly. The Pale King used words to give bugs consciousness. Zote's trying to do the same thing too, but he's too incompetent. His nail can't hurt anything because deep down, even Zote knows he's a fraud. The character is a commentary on fake confidence and the power of belief. He named his nail something cool, hoping reality would follow. It didn't. So what if one smiling mushroom was actually winking at a scrappy jam game from before Hollow Knight even existed? Mr. Mushroom says, "It's nice that you were able to help your friend. So, you're not hungry anymore." This is a direct reference to Hungry Knight, Team Cherry's terrible game jam project. In that game, you kill bugs to avoid starving and resurrect a champion. Mr. Mushroom somehow knows about the knight's previous incarnation. This meta reference went over everyone's head for years. The knight canonically was the Hungry Knight before becoming a vessel. Hollow Knight might be a sequel to a Flash game that got 1 star. Another myth sits on paper trimmed before most could read it, much like the dream ideas that got carved down later. Here's another thing they probably regret cutting down so much. That opening poem, Elegy for Hollownest, was originally 3 times longer. Team Cherry wrote this epic poem explaining the whole kingdom's history, but playtesters kept skipping it, so they cut it down to the vague version we got. The full poem is probably sitting in Team Cherry's files with all the lore answers we have debated for years. They realized players want to play games, not read poetry. But somewhere out there is a long poem that explains everything, and we'll never see it. Sometimes less is more, but lore hunters would commit crimes for that full version. With a tiny team, brutal cuts shaped the dream realm that started with one floating fool. With such a small team, it's no wonder they had to simplify some of their more ambitious ideas. The early Dreamnail trailer is disturbing. The knight literally chops off part of Elderbug's skull. Like a whole chunk just pops off and dives into a well made of brain matter. You'd meet younger versions of characters and fight their literal nightmares. Team Cherry eventually realized that having the knight perform brain surgery on friendly NPCs was maybe too much, even for their dark game. Now we weave a magic nail and read thoughts, which is way less invasive than skull removal. Sometimes the first idea isn't the best idea, specifically when it involves chopping heads open. Even the Dream Realm took its cues from a floating fool. Gorb, the self-proclaimed greatest mind, was actually the very first Dream Warrior that Team Cherry designed during development. His completely ridiculous personality and dialogue set the tone for all the other Dream Warriors being slightly unhinged and eccentric. The floating brain design literally came from someone's random doodle during a team meeting that everyone thought was hilarious. Ascend with Gorb became an internal team meme during development, and they'd say it whenever implementing any kind of vertical movement in the game. This is why Gorb feels more polished and memorable than some other Dream Warriors, since he had the most development time and attention. His dialogue being pure nonsense was intentional comic relief in an otherwise incredibly dark and depressing game. Team Cherry needed at least one boss that was purely funny rather than tragic. From there, the joke left the whiteboard and entered the culture. Inside Team Cherry, the phrase "ascend with Gorb" became a running joke. They used it whenever they were working on vertical movement mechanics. The joke was so strong that it eventually slipped into the game itself. What started as casual developer humor became part of Hollow Knight's culture, both in and outside the studio. Now fans echo the phrase like the developers once did. It's a great example of how inside jokes can escape the office and turn into shared community memes. In a way, Gorb really did ascend, not just the game, but in gaming culture as well. Did that early joke secretly set the tone for every Dreamweaver warrior that followed? As we just said, the first Dream Warrior designed was Gorb, and his wild personality set the standard for all of the others. Instead of being calm ghosts of fallen warriors, they came across as unhinged, eccentric, and sometimes hilarious. That initial choice shaped every Dream Warrior fight that followed. Players came to expect strange dialogue and chaotic energy whenever they entered a dream battle. Gorb's influence was everywhere, showing how one design decision can ripple across an entire part of the game. The Dream Warriors are memorable because they all feel a little off, and that tone started with the very first one. And while dream fights were trimmed for balance, the prankster streak popped up somewhere more expensive. Dream Warriors were supposed to respawn so you could practice fighting them. Team Cherry cut this because it made essence farming too easy. Speedrunners would have loved repeatable boss fights for practice. The code infrastructure still exists, and modders have made them respawnable. This shows how many features get cut for balance, not technical reasons. Team Cherry constantly chose making a coherent game over adding cool features. Sometimes what sounds fun breaks the game, so it has to die. The same mischievous streak shows up outside of platforming, and it hits your wallet. The banker Millabelle, who steals all your money, was literally someone at Team Cherry's idea of a hilarious joke. They thought it was absolutely hysterical that players would trust a banker in a dying, collapsing kingdom. The betrayal was planned from the very beginning, and her name is a dead giveaway because it's Mill plus Belle, which basically means beautiful thief. Finding her later in the pleasure house was supposed to be comedic, but players were just furious instead of laughing. Team Cherry completely underestimated how much money players would actually deposit with her. Some people lost thousands of geo and rage quit the entire game. The developers honestly thought everyone would be suspicious of a banker in a place called Hollow Nest, but they were dead wrong. After all that quiet tragedy, the flower quest twists the knife with mercy disguised as punishment. That brutal, delicate flower quest where one hit breaks it is where you can get infinite flowers from the Grey Mourner's corpse. Team Cherry could have made it truly one-shot, but decided that that was too cruel. The fact that a dead NPC gives infinite flowers is never explained. It's either a bug or mercy. Speedrunners have routed the safest path, killing every enemy beforehand. Some players spend hours clearing every threat before attempting the run. The infinite flowers are Team Cherry admitting their quest design was sadistic. Even they knew they went too far with this one. And while quests toyed with mercy, a mossy loudmouth toyed with prophecy from another game entirely. The Moss Prophet's weird dialogue about the return of the light wasn't actually about the Radiance or anything that happens in Hollow Knight. He was setting up Silksong before Team Cherry even knew that they'd make a sequel. His crazy ravings mentioned that things don't happen in Hollow Nest, but do happen in Farloom, Hornet's World. Team Cherry was planting sequel seeds without realizing it, which is why his dialogue feels so disconnected from the main story. Players spent years trying to decode his mysterious meanings, not realizing he was prophesizing a completely different game that didn't exist yet. The moss infection he describes matches Farloom's green corruption way better than Hollow Nest's orange plague. He's basically the gaming world's most accurate fortune teller. Prophecies aside, some systems were made up on the fly, starting with maps and money. Having to buy maps from Cornifer was added just weeks before the game's release. Originally, all maps were completely free, but Team Cherry realized players needed something to spend their geo on in the early game. The prices for different area maps were made up randomly, and there's absolutely no logic to why some areas cost more than others. Cornifer leaving his map behind if you don't buy it was added so players couldn't get permanently lost and quit the game. The whole map system was actually controversial with playtesters who wanted traditional auto-mapping like most modern games. Team Cherry stuck to their version that exploration should be more meaningful and require investment. Making players pay for basic navigation was their way of forcing more careful exploration. And when wallets closed, Crystal Peak opened by attacking your speakers. The crystallized enemies in Crystal Peak emit sound frequencies that can actually damage cheap speakers if you play them at high volume. Team Cherry had no idea this was happening until after release when players started complaining about hardware damage. The resonant sound effects use frequencies that cause physical vibrations in certain types of speakers, potentially breaking them. They considered patching it but decided it was accidentally perfect for the Crystal theme. Your equipment suffers in Crystal Peak just like you do. Some speedrunners actually turn off all their sound when going through this area to protect their expensive gaming setups. The laser crystal enemy's charging sound is apparently the worst offender. Team Cherry's response was basically just turn your volume down. They turned a technical oversight into atmospheric design. Ever notice how a game's harshest noises and its most elegant battle cries come from the same person? Flukemarm's absolutely horrifying Flesh Mother's screeches were voiced by Makoto Koji, the exact same person who voiced Hornet's elegant warrior princess sounds. She went from graceful Shaw battle cries to nightmarish blob monster noises in the same recording session. The voice acting session was apparently hilarious, with everyone laughing at the horrible sounds Koji had to make. She needed multiple takes because people kept breaking character from the ridiculousness. The final Flukemarm screech is actually several different takes layered together for maximum horror. This is incredible voice acting range, and it's from fan favorite character to pure nightmare fuel. Once you know this connection, you'll never be able to unhear it. Koji deserves awards for that incredible vocal performance and range. Behind those voices and everything else, one coder kept the ship from sinking. David Kazi, the technical director who made Hollow Knight actually function, left Team Cherry in 2017 for a corporate job. Without his coding, the game wouldn't exist. He built all the systems that William and Ari constantly broke with their wild ideas. And after the game succeeded, he got better offers and left. Kazi's work ethic was legendary because he'd fix whatever insane thing the artists dreamed up. His departure explains why Silksong just took so long. Finding someone who could match his skills while tolerating Team Cherry's chaos wasn't easy. The unsung hero who made the bugs actually worked, quite literally. But even with his genius code, one platform still felt sluggish in your hands. If you've played Hollow Knight on Switch, you might have noticed something feels off. Players have been complaining about the input lag since 2018, yet Team Cherry insists it doesn't exist. On PC, everything feels snappy, but when you move to Switch, it's like your knight had a big lunch before heading into battle. Even speedrunners refuse to touch the Switch version because the delay is that noticeable. Strangely, it's not tied to frame rates either, so even a locked 60 FPS doesn't fix it. The exact cause remains a mystery, but Switch players swear it's real. It's basically the Switch tax on reaction time. Zooming out from the frame timings, the only real reason any of this existed was cheap rent and stubbornness. But let's step back and appreciate how this masterpiece even got made in the first place. Hollow Knight exists because Adelaide is boring and cheap. Team Cherry survived on $57,000 for years because Adelaide has the cheapest rent in Australia. If they'd been in Sydney or Melbourne, they would have run out of money in months. They worked in an office so small they could hear each other breathing. William's dad would show up with $20 bills so he could eat. The game exists because of geographic economics. A masterpiece was born from poverty, cheap rent, and leftover food. Sometimes the best art comes from the worst of circumstances. That scrappy energy also birthed a joke that snowballed into a sequel. Silksong actually began as an April Fool's Day prank concept that Team Cherry ended up genuinely liking. They created fake screenshots of playing as Hornet to mess with their fans on social media. The overwhelmingly positive reaction made them seriously consider actually making it real instead of just a joke. What started as a simple gotcha prank turned into a full sequel that fans have been waiting years for. The original Hornet DLC announcement was going to be revealed on April 1st, but they worried that nobody would take it seriously if they announced it on April Fool's Day. The gaming industry's most anticipated sequel exists because Team Cherry couldn't resist making a good prank that actually became their next major project. So when the sequel began as a prank, did the devs also change how they handled updates from day one? After Hollow Knight's rocky launch, Team Cherry changed their strategy for Silksong. Instead of releasing updates to everyone at once, they opened public beta branches where fans could test patches early. This turned players into volunteer bug hunters who were actually excited to find issues. It helped the developers avoid disasters where game-breaking problems hit thousands of players at the same time. Fans even chose to play buggy versions just to help out and get early access. What started as a fix for past mistakes became a new way of involving the community, and today this approach is common in indie game development. Process sorted, the team looked to nature for attitude. When designing Silksong, Team Cherry looked closely at real hunting wasps. These insects paralyzed their prey and dragged them into nests, which inspired many of the enemy behaviors in the game. It gave the combat a sharp, aggressive feel grounded in real science. Players ended up fighting enemies that behaved like actual predators. That level of detail makes the game's ecosystem feel alive and dangerous. Nature provided the blueprint, and Team Cherry turned it into gameplay. Instead of just making things up, they studied real wasps and turned their terrifying strategies into the foundation of Hornet's new challenges. And once the predators were set, the Hive welcomed volunteers to poke the nest. Silksong's beta branch system lets players test unfinished updates early. The catch is, they're playing for the game and acting as free quality testers at the same time. It sounds strange, but fans love it. They get to try the new content before everyone else and help Team Cherry fix problems. This approach prevents disastrous launches like Hollow Knight's early patches, where major bugs hit thousands of people at once. The community now willingly chooses to play broken versions just to contribute. It's a win-win, as developers get to help and players feel like part of the process. Today, many indie studios use this same strategy. Back in Hollow Nest, even the plague started life as a kitchen gag. The infection was called rotten pizza cheese during development. For months, an art team called them pizza bubbles, and Ari Gibson spent weeks trying to make infected creatures look sick without being too gross. The orange color was chosen because it contrasted with the blue-gray palette. Earlier versions were green and purple, but looked too generic. Every infected enemy was covered in what looked like moldy mozzarella before they refined it. The deadly plague that destroyed a kingdom started as pizza toppings. Game development gets pretty weird. And when a whole village was cut, its cheerful vibe crawled into a very different bug. Barbadon, the giant caterpillar, probably inherited their personality. He's weirdly cheerful for living in a dying world, just like the snails were supposed to be. They were meant to be comic relief, chatting about normal stuff while the world burns. Team Cherry couldn't waste good writing, so they gave it to a different bug. Bardoon is basically a snail that got transformed into a caterpillar during development. His chill attitude in the apocalypse makes sense when you know he was supposed to be a completely different character. What happens when the magic system changes colors and the lore has to catch up? Originally, every single spell in the game was going to be void-based with black and purple visual effects instead of the white soul magic we see now. Team Cherry changed them to soul-based magic to create visual clarity and distinguish them from actual void abilities like the Shade. Shade Soul and Descending Dark are remnants of this original design plan, which is why spell upgrades suddenly become void-themed when everything else is white. The entire lore about soul and void being different mystical forces was created after the fact to justify this color change for gameplay clarity. Team Cherry needed players to easily distinguish between different types of abilities and created new world-building lore to support their UI design decisions. Sometimes the deepest metaphysical concepts in fiction are actually determined by practical interface needs. Meanwhile, a friendly chat could still nuke a run in the most mundane of ways. But before that sequel was even a thought, the original game had bugs that could ruin your playthrough instantly. Here's a bug that perfectly captures how fragile game development really is. Talking to Cloth in Queen's Gardens could permanently freeze your dialogue box and softlock your entire game. Imagine fully finding this beloved character, trying to have a friendly conversation, and then your game just breaks forever. Team Cherry's dialogue system had character-specific problems that could literally end your playthrough through normal social interaction. The fix was necessary to prevent what they probably called social interaction disasters internally. It's pretty fitting that Cloth, who's all about helping others, could accidentally ruin your entire adventure just by being too talkative. Sometimes the most innocent actions in games can have the most catastrophic consequences, and talking to friendly NPCs shouldn't be a risky activity that requires saving first. Balance corrections came fast once players hit a brick wall early, and even with that new testing system, some bosses still slipped through far too strong. When Silksong was released, one boss in particular gave players nightmares: Morwing. That fight was so overtuned that new players felt like they hit a wall way too early. Complaints flooded in, and surprisingly, Team Cherry listened fast. Within just weeks, the boss was patched and made easier. This shows how much the studio learned about balancing from their first game. Having an early boss be too difficult can kill interest before people get hooked, so adjusting quickly kept players engaged. The change proves how modern game development can respond directly to feedback instead of leaving players stuck with punishing design. And that wall had a second layer waiting right behind it. But it wasn't just Morwing giving early players trouble, Sister Splinter was just as bad. Sister Splinter, another early boss, was also tuned too high and had to be patched soon after launch. This revealed that the early game was miscalibrated overall, making it tough for newer players to even get started. Internal testing clearly didn't reflect how real players would handle these fights. Team Cherry acted fast yet again, rolling out changes that made the game more welcoming. Still, it highlights how bosses can feel very different at launch compared to later patches. For many fans, the first versions of these fights is something newer players will never experience. Even the rank and file were hitting harder than intended under the hood. The balancing problems didn't stop with bosses. Even the weakest enemies were stronger than intended. Regular enemies, like sand carvers, were secretly dealing more damage than intended. Players thought the game was just tough, but really the numbers were wrong. Once Team Cherry realized the mistake, they patched enemy damage down without saying exactly by how much. Suddenly, fights felt more balanced and less unfair. This small tweak showed how much the combat system had been leaning on faulty calculations. Instead of being based on design choices, the difficulty was inflated by incorrect math. Fixing those values made battles feel challenging but not overwhelming anymore. Everything a tiny vegetable would need a physics patch just to register a tap, and while damage numbers were being fixed, smaller details were getting equal attention. One of the funniest patch notes ever was slight increase in P-Pod collider scale. Basically, players were missing P-Pods not because they were bad at aiming, but because the hitboxes were just too small. That meant a plant collectible needed an official physics fix. Team Cherry actually documented this with pride, which is both hilarious and admirable. After the update, collecting pods felt smoother, even though most people probably never realized why. It might sound tiny, but these little tweaks made the game flow better. Sometimes even vegetables deserve the spotlight when it comes to game design polish. Zoom back out, and the sequel's entire economy was the real hazard. While P-Pods were getting fixed, the entire game's economic system was breaking down. Early in Silksong, basic upgrades and benches were priced so high that players couldn't afford them without endless grinding. This wasn't difficulty based on skill, but on bad economics. Fans quickly pointed out how punishing the system felt, and Team Cherry responded by lowering prices across the board, making progression more accessible. These changes were like a digital stimulus plan, giving players room to actually enjoy the game without being blocked by costs. The fix also showed how tricky balancing in-game economies can be. What feels fair during testing can turn out punishing in real gameplay once thousands of players get involved. Fixing prices helped, but rewards still felt stingy until the payouts changed. Lowering prices wasn't the final fix, because the whole system still felt unrewarding. After lowering prices, Team Cherry realized the whole in-game economy still wasn't rewarding enough, so they boosted payouts from relics, psalm cylinders, and courier deliveries all at once. They essentially gave players a raise through patches, fixing how unrewarding the original system felt. The adjustment turned boring grinds into something that actually supported progression. It was like the Bug Kingdom got its own economic recovery plan. For players, this meant upgrades felt attainable instead of locked behind endless farming. It proves that even in a fantasy world, bad economics can ruin fun, and sometimes the only fix is a patch. Then the story itself reached in and ripped core abilities away by accident. So while the economy was finally fixed, some story events were still breaking things in devastating ways. One of the scariest bugs in Silksong came during the slab escape sequence. A glitch could permanently remove your cloak, leaving you without a core ability. Players were losing powers not through design, but through broken cutscenes. Imagine escaping danger only to realize your character was ruined forever. It was incredibly frustrating for anyone unlucky enough to trigger it. Team Cherry had to step in and make sure dramatic story moments no longer broke the game. Story events are supposed to enhance gameplay, not destroy it, and this bug showed how fragile game state coding can be when narrative and mechanics collide. And if that hurt, bugged wishes twisted the knife for completionists. In the late game, two wishes called Infestation Operation and Beast in the Bells could bug out and never complete. That meant players were left chasing goals that could not be finished, which is one of the most frustrating experiences in gaming. People who invested hours into side quests found themselves permanently blocked. It felt cruelly ironic that literal wishes became impossible. Team Cherry had to build complex fixes to repair progression paths and make sure wishes could be granted again. It is thematically dark, but practically awful when quests punish you for advancing the story normally. For completionists, it was devastating. Would you trade consistency for a bug that let you float forever? By bouncing off certain projectiles at the right moment, players could trick the game into giving them permanent levitation. Essentially, Hornet gained accidental flight through physics bugs. It wasn't planned, but it worked well enough that players exploited it for fun. Some even argued it was cooler than official abilities. Sadly for fans though, Team Cherry patched it out. Still, it shows how game physics can create weird weird but magical moments. The fact that gravity could become optional proves how complex even simple systems are under the hood. Sometimes the best surprises in games come from bugs rather than features. Fun aside, broken mail yanked real rewards out from under players. In Act 3, courier deliveries could completely break, meaning players lost access to rewards right when they needed them most. For anyone focused on late-game progression, that was brutal. The bug meant advancing the main story could actually destroy the mail system. Imagine finally reaching the hardest parts of the game, only to lose the upgrades you were supposed to receive. Team Cherry had to fix it to restore postal services to the Bug Kingdom. While thematically funny, unreliable mail is a disaster for gameplay. Progression should never be blocked by broken deliveries, especially when the challenges only get tougher. But broken mail wasn't the only time the rules betrayed players, because even memory sequences played tricks. When players entered memory sections, some abilities worked differently without explanation. For example, Craft Bind behaved strangely, confusing people who relied on muscle memory. It turned out that these flashback areas had separate rules coded into them, and while that might sound creative, it ended up feeling inconsistent and frustrating. Abilities should feel the same, no matter the context. Team Cherry eventually patched things so powers behaved consistently across all sequences. It's fascinating how different game states can break mechanics without anyone noticing at first. Memory areas are supposed to add to the story, not mess with the rules players depend on. Worse yet, some boss arenas tripped over themselves before the fight even began. During the Deep Docks battle, Lace could soft lock the fight immediately through tool deflection. Players entered the arena only to find the fight broken before it began. Having a boss encounter fail at the starting line is a huge letdown. Fans had to restart multiple times, killing the excitement of facing a big challenge. Team Cherry quickly fixed it so the battle would always load correctly. It shows just how delicate combat coding can be behind the scenes. Boss fights are the big payoff moments of games, and when they break instantly, it makes everything leading up to them feel wasted. And while bosses were breaking before the fight even began, regular enemies were breaking the rules of reality itself. Silk Snippers had a strange bug where they could get stuck outside the playable area in Chapel of the Reaper. That meant enemies literally escaped reality, making them impossible to fight. Players were left swinging at nothing while invisible foes existed beyond reach. It was funny in concept, but frustrating in practice. The fix kept enemies trapped where they belonged, making fights fair yet again. This bug highlights how collision systems have to be precise, or chaos happens. Regular enemies transcending dimensions sounds like an art experiment, but in an action game, it breaks immersion fast. Thankfully, this glitch didn't last long. Ever have the whole game flip you upside down and refuse to turn back? Claw Mirrors had a glitch where Hornet could get stuck permanently upside down after taking damage while binding. The screen didn't fix itself, leaving players to experience the world inverted. It was disorienting and made long play sessions almost impossible. The bug happened from a very specific timing, which made it rare, but nasty. Team Cherry patched it to restore normal orientation, so mirrors behaved properly. This shows how fragile visual state coding can be. A single mistake in timing was enough to flip the entire game world. For those unlucky enough to see it, Silksong turned into an upside-down adventure. Step outside the code and you can hear Adelaide in the quiet between fights. Zooming back out, the real city around the team colored everything. Hollow Knight's tone was shaped by Adelaide itself. The city is quiet, affordable, and a little isolated, and that atmosphere seeped into the game's design. The calm pacing, the sense of loneliness, and even the reflective tone all mirror the environment where the developers lived and worked. Hollow Nest feels contemplative because Team Cherry absorbed that mood from their surroundings. Geography doesn't just decide costs, it also influences creativity. By living in Adelaide, the developers built a game that carried the spirit of their city. In many ways, the soul of Hollow Knight belongs to Adelaide as much as to Team Cherry. And when it comes time to share that quiet with consoles, friends lent a hand. Console ports of Hollow Knight wouldn't have happened without help. An Australian studio called Shark Jump stepped in to assist Team Cherry with the heavy technical lifting. Porting is tough, especially for such a small dev team, and Shark Jump made it possible. Thanks to their help, Hollow Knight reached PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch audiences smoothly. It's another example of indie studios supporting each other instead of competing. Collaboration like this keeps the scene alive and healthy. Players get better experiences, and developers get to share resources. In this case, Sharks helped bugs reach more players around the world. Hollow Knight's story shows how passion, place, and tiny details shaped something unforgettable. And it's the same with the Arkham trilogy. Games full of hidden history, strange design choices, and even more bizarre systems that players never notice. If you want 2 hours of secrets and stories from one of the most beloved superhero franchises ever, check out this video next. I'll see you there.